How you feeling right now? I know how I'm feeling, slightly uneasy, a little bit creeped out by all those sounds we just heard. This is Joe Gilmore. It's Friday, September 17th, 2021. And the first part of that is from a YouTube clip that someone uploaded back in 2007 from their journey up to a Soundgarden, which is an art installation in Seattle. I believe it's still there. It was created by an artist named Douglas Hollis back in 82, and I guess he finished it in 83, as this headstone here says. And we heard the wind howling through these structures that Douglas Hollis put in, and creates an almost etheric, otherworldly, but eerie kind of howling atmosphere. And we went straight from that into the Soundgarden song 665, which is the third song off of their first album, Ultra Mega OK. And you may have thought that I did some kind of trick there where I mixed the two songs together. I didn't do anything at all. All I did was put one clipping next to the other. They just happened to sound very similar, especially the feedback on the guitar, almost as if Kim Thale or Chris Cornell were trying to make their guitars sound like what we hear at a Soundgarden. And that's highly possible because they named themselves after a Soundgarden. And in fact, the very first thing you hear on that album, Ultra Mega OK, is Kim Thale blowing on his strings. That's the sound at the beginning of Flower, which, interestingly enough, that's what we find in a garden. One of the wonderful things that made Soundgarden so unique was their use of words. They had sort of an uncanny, eccentric humor slash, I don't know, psychedelic way of presenting themselves lyrically that was just very unique. And, you know, the name Soundgarden is a perfect example. I mean, I think every one of us, the first time we heard it, then it took a minute to process, or maybe even days, to let the name sort of swirl around your head and go, what does that mean? And you hear the band, and they actually make these sounds, especially early on. They incorporated a lot more noise. I remember being at a Soundgarden show, and after they were done playing, they subjected the crowd to what seemed like a half hour of just noise, just their instruments just sitting there wailing away. Maybe it was longer, I don't know, but it was, by the end of it, it was excruciating. It was like, wow, what is this, some crazy experiment? And, you know, especially in the beginning, in interviews, the band had this thing where, you know, you'd try to describe what they were doing back to them, and they'd be, you know, Cornell would have this grin on his face, or the drummer would have a grin on his face, like almost as if they knew you weren't going to figure it out, but they were really entertained by you trying. You know, almost like they took a harmless but sadistic delight in watching people try and fail to figure out what they're all about, made the band kind of intellectual in a weird, unspoken kind of way. And if you take the word Soundgarden, I mean, it's actually a perfect metaphor for the record industry because, you know, the band's playing sound. And what's the garden? Well, the garden could be, you know, the music rehearsal studio, or even a concert where the sound is played. And then what is the who's tilling the land? Who's pruning the plants? Who's growing everything? That would be the band members, you know, along with their financiers. And the fruit, you know, the harvest would be the music itself, the CDs, the vinyl, or what else, the digital downloads and such. And then, you know, people consume it and they pay for it, and everyone makes money and everyone's happy, right? You know, it's just it's kind of a brilliant yet very specific metaphor when you look at it in those terms. And I think the band does want you. They encourage and invite you to look deeper into these things and figure it out, even as they kind of get off on watching you not really do it properly. Now, when Soundgarden came back from their hiatus, I think it was 2014 or something like that, apparently the first comeback show they played, they went under the name Nude Dragons. And if you look at this word Nude Dragons, it has 11 letters in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, Soundgarden also has 11 letters in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is called an anagram. It's when you take a word or a phrase and you switch the letters around to form new words or phrases. Now, the most difficult kind of anagram to make is one where you use all the letters in the original word or phrase to form a new word or phrase. And the reason why that's the hardest version is because it has to make sense, right? Now, does Nude Dragons make any sense? Well, it's kind of gibberish, right? But I mean, this is kind of part of that eccentric Soundgarden humor that we're used to. It doesn't sound that weird if you're a Soundgarden fan and you know how they think. But, yeah, nude is a word and dragons is a word. So, it's a good anagram. It's a clever one. Another one that we might be more familiar with would be Mr. Mojo Rising. And as you can see, feelnumb.com put up this useful picture here so we can really see it broken down. And if you listen to the album L.A. Woman by The Doors, or you listen to the song L.A. Woman by The Doors, you can hear Jim Morrison chanting. The song sort of breaks down and gets real slow, and then right before it speeds up, Jim Morrison starts chanting, Mr. Mojo Rising, and he says it over and over. And why would he do that? Well, obviously he was inviting fans to kind of dig into it and go, what does that mean? And, Soundgarden does a similar thing. They put these things out there to sort of taunt you, like to sort of tempt you to, here, try and figure that out, And the ultimate question is, does it really mean something, or is it just an artist throwing it out there just to see how you'll respond? And what's particularly brilliant about this anagram is the word rising has a missing G, right? But this is really how Jim Morrison says it in the song. He says rising because he was a fan of the blues. And if you listen to, Howlin' Wolf, he doesn't say the G, right? He doesn't say Howling Wolf, he says Howlin' Wolf. And you listen to Muddy Waters and, old Southern blues artists like this that Jim Morrison was influenced by, well, you see that the phrase Mr. Mojo Rising fits right in with that type of vernacular. So even though rising isn't a word, even though it's slang, the slang makes more sense than if it said rising. So that's the kind of subtle detail that I think could easily go over our heads that we could take for granted, but it's really pretty brilliant. The mojo thing. I mean, that's an old blues thing too. And then the whole voodoo thing and all the rumors and, it all fits together perfectly somehow. So when we talk about their song titles, Soundgarden song titles, they're all very abstract, ultra mega okay. Ultra mega is not a word. I mean, we can figure out what it means easy enough just by breaking it down, but that's not a word, ultra mega. A bad motor finger isn't a word. Super unknown isn't a word. Why do they do this? When you put words and phrases out there, it's you're inviting people to scrutinize it, So I'm going to take them up on that invitation, and I'm going to see if there's an anagram that I can make from ultra mega okay. And what I came up with was a MK ultra ego. Now look at this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 letters. Just like the word Soundgarden has 11 letters. And how many letters does ultra mega okay have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the anagram I came up with has the exact same amount of letters, and it's all the same letters that are in here, and none of them are repeated, and none of them are removed. Now, what got me really thinking about this was the fact that a MK Ultra ego is actually technically a more proper and normal phrase than ultra mega okay. So then I got to thinking, well, did they start with the phrase AMK Ultra Ego and then try to come up with an anagram for that? And I know I'm opening a can of worms here, but if you've looked at some of my other blogs, you know that opening cans of worms is what I do. That's what I like to do. It's, trying to take a sort of right brain approach to a lot of these topics, because I think that most people have gotten a little too trapped into a left brain sort of thinking. And when I talk about left brain versus right brain, I mean, Kim Thale would understand this very well, being that he, I believe has a degree in philosophy. The right hemisphere of the brain, we say, is primarily concerned with dreams and free association, colors, sounds, creativity, artistry. Whereas the left brain is more about mathematics, facts and figures, linear time, things that make sense, things that are logical. The agents in the film The Matrix, they're all about left brain, rules and regulations. Whereas breaking that mold, that's the right brain when you're breaking the mold. So just being a Soundgarden fan, at least initially, I think attracted more right brain type of people because they appeal a lot to the right brain. They invite you to take these things apart and try and figure out what they mean. And they might make fun of you while you do it, but they are inviting you to do it. So like I said, I'm taking them up on the invitation. I'm saying, okay, well, what's this all about, guys? A MK Ultra ego. What is MK Ultra? So if we take a look at Wikipedia here, and like I've said before, I don't refer to Wikipedia because I believe it has all the facts. I refer to Wikipedia because it's what people in the status quo generally believe is the accepted explanation of most things. So that's why I use Wikipedia. Anyhow, I've seen this in interviews that I've read with the band, so I know this checks out. So according to Wikipedia, Cornell explained that the title Ultra Mega OK means absolutely, unbelievably not bad. And goes on to state that with Ultra Mega OK, we really liked the songs on that record, but we were disappointed in the production. We were sort of making fun of the finished product. It was Ultra Mega all right. Ultra Mega could have been better, but not bad. And I would have to agree, it's a very murky sounding album, although being that I listened to it a lot, I got used to it and I came to like the murky quality myself. But the recent remix, you can really hear how much clearer the album is, and you can really see that what Cornell said here does check out, quite easily. But I can't help but notice that the fact that the band had major label interest already at this point, and they had Jack Endino with them that I believe he produced their FOP EP, who knew their sound very well. But I guess their choice to go with an underground punk rock label, SST, their choice to maintain their underground integrity came at the cost of sacrificing production. So it's just kind of odd that, they'd go with a sort of underground punk rock label, but they didn't want punk rock production. They wanted, big production. Well, you guys should have went with the major label. So obviously the band hasn't said anything about MK Ultra. So why would we think that this is some hidden meaning behind the band? Well, before getting into that, what is MK Ultra? Is this some conspiracy theory that, only people like myself believe in? Well, look at this. This is history.com, History Channel. All right, and they're talking about MK Ultra. And as I've pointed out in some of my blogs at bathshitcave.blogspot.com and on videos here, the CIA has unclassified documents talking about their MK Ultra program. So this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a real conspiracy that actually existed, and it's probably still going on, to be honest. But here's what the History Channel, or historychannel.com, had to say about it in 2018, or I guess 2017. MK Ultra was a top secret CIA project in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, sometimes on unwitting U.S. citizens, to assess the potential use of LSD and other drugs for mind control, information gathering, and psychological torture. Though Project MKUltra lasted from 1953 until about 1973, details of the illicit program didn't become public until 1975. During a congressional investigation into widespread illegal CIA activities within the United States and around the world. Now, it's important to note that the CIA didn't come out with their hands up going, we feel really bad about drugging unwitting civilians and getting them to do things and torturing them and using drugs on them and just totally playing with their lives as if as if they're just pawns in our game of, societal control and psychological warfare. They came out with this under pressure. It was coaxed out of them. So I think it's very important for people to realize that this type of stuff happens and we don't know it. Now, there's a lot of information here that is worth looking into. But if we go down to this section, this is very interesting and applies a little more to the topic at hand. Ken Kesey, author of the 1962 novel One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest, volunteered for MKUltra experiments with LSD while he was a college student at Stanford University. Kesey later went on to promote the drug, hosting LSD-fueled parties that he called acid tests. Acid tests combine drug use with musical performances by bands, including the Grateful Dead, and psychedelic effects such as fluorescent, paint, and blacklights. These parties influenced the early development of hippie culture and kickstarted the 1960s psychedelic drug scene. So think about that for a second now. I thought that the hippies were just these losers that didn't want to go to, get drafted into the Vietnam War, and they just didn't want to get jobs, and they were just deadbeats that just wanted to have sex all day and join weird cults and just do drugs and just drop out of society. I thought that's what the hippies were. But what they're saying here, they're saying it right here. These parties, these acid tests, influenced the early development of hippie culture and kickstarted the 1960s psychedelic drug scene. So what are they saying here? Are they saying the CIA kicked off the psychedelic drug scene? I mean, so if the CIA did it, don't we have the wrong idea about all these hippies and stuff? What does this say about Charles Manson and all that scene? I mean, again, this is a can of worms that just blows up really quickly if we take them at their word here. Now, these acid tests, when you read the description here, is very similar. When you read this, it's very similar to what was going on in England and in Europe. There was a club called I think it was called UFO Club. And The Who used to play there, and Pink Floyd. They used to have these, these raves with all these lights and, visuals, and people were on drugs. We know this because their original singer, Syd Barrett, lost his mind and never got it back. He went completely crazy. And if you read the biography Saucer Full of Secrets, they talk about how Syd Barrett was breaking up pills and putting it in his hair and putting acid in his hair, and he just played one note all night, and that was it. He was done. He was a vegetable, and he never really recovered. So you got to wonder, were they doing the same thing over there? What is it with, you step back and you go, what is the music scene? What about today? Do we think that they just stopped doing this? Why would they stop doing it? We gotta take this stuff seriously, because if we want to get to the bottom of all these deaths and these mysterious events, we got to start thinking differently about our environment. We got to start asking different questions. And an interesting thing about the Grateful Dead is, Grateful Dead were originally called the Warlocks, which is a male witch. And the manager of the Grateful Dead in the beginning was Hank Harrison. Who is Hank Harrison's daughter? That would be Courtney Love of the band Hole, the one who was married to Kurt Cobain when he died, the one who Hank Harrison himself said in interviews, several interviews, that he thinks his daughter had something to do with Kurt Cobain's death. So I don't know how much credence I would put into the words of Hank Harrison. He's pretty out there. I don't know a whole lot about him, but I've looked into it, and I know enough about him to know that he's pretty out there. and he probably was CIA. And if you look at Wikipedia, you look at the Courtney Love entry, go look at that. Talk about a rabbit hole. It says that Hank Harrison, her dad, gave her acid when she was a kid. So think about the kind of culture that Courtney Love grew up in. And now think about Chris Cornell and the fact that he did a lot of drugs when he was a kid. His father was a pharmacist. Okay, he talks about doing pharmaceuticals at a very young age. Much younger than me. Sure, there's a lot of kids that get their hands on alcohol, get their hands on drugs, before they're even 18 and have all kinds of problems. Usually it's a result of neglect, of parents not being present. Where was Chris Cornell's dad? His parents got divorced when they were very young. But so MK Ultra has its roots in the Nazi experiments that were conducted on Jewish concentration camp detainees. And this is something you can look into. It's you got to have a stomach for it because it's really horrible stuff. But so that's why it's MK. It's mind control with a K, the German spelling, and that's where it comes from. And so, is there something in the Soundgarden lyrics that point towards this, that confirm that there's this anagram in their name? I don't know. Let's take a look at it. We look at the lyrics to Ultra Mega OK, and maybe we'll find something like that, right? So if we look at song number 3, we find that it's called 665. Now, that was what we heard earlier. We heard the music of 665. It's a instrumental with Cornell chanting words over it, and then he screams words that are backwards, okay? And we see here that he's saying, it's creeping in so slow, trapping it, nobody's home. It's creeping in so slow, trapping it, nobody's home. And if you go on YouTube and you look it up, someone actually reversed this song, played it in reverse and put it on YouTube so you can listen to it. And if you play it backwards, what Chris Cornell says is, Santa, I love you, baby. My Christmas king. Santa, you're my king. I love you, Santa baby. Got what I need. So obviously this is the band's humor. They're making fun of the cliche of heavy metal bands that turn albums backwards. Now, I don't really consider Ultra Mega OK a heavy metal band. I mean, it's too blunt. It's too murky. It's way more experimental. But I guess they got some kind of Grammy for this album. Like they won some sort of heavy metal Grammy. It's almost as if the industry was forcing the audience to perceive Soundgarden as heavy metal, even though they weren't. I mean, Bad Motorfinger, okay, that's getting a lot closer to metal, although even that album is arguably not metal. But Ultra Mega OK, I would say it's pretty far from being metal. I'm just guessing that, Chris Cornell banging his head on stage, just, the media latched onto that and just decided to, call the band a heavy metal band for that reason, which still doesn't really make sense. But anyhow, so the band has this weird insecurity about, and I call it an insecurity because they make fun of this a lot. It's a joke they really draw out. This idea of the satanic heavy metal band. And this kind of gets into, Led Zeppelin and the old cliche where you turn Stairway to Heaven backwards and it says, this is to my sweet Satan. I've heard it myself. It does kind of sound like Robert Plant says that. But, that's kind of where the cliche begins, and this is what they're making fun of. But what's odd is how Soundgarden will make fun of something, but then kind of do it and sort of embody the very cliche that they're making fun of. So somehow approaching it from an ironic point of view, from a depreciating point of view, somehow the cliche becomes renewed and becomes valid and becomes okay and acceptable and cool again. So it's just very interesting. It's again, this is one of the things that made Soundgarden a very original band, and in a way kind of embodied the whole attitude of the quote unquote Seattle, sound, the grunge thing. This is what made them pioneers, because there was an irony behind it and a humor behind it. But there was a heavy darkness as well and a lot of death. So we're exploring that dark side right now. That's what's going on. So Santa. Now, Santa is an anagram, or you could say Satan is an anagram of Santa. Because look, S-A-N-T-A. All you have to do is switch these letters around and you get Satan. Who's Santa? Saint Nick, right? He's a saint. So you're saying, Chris Cornell's saying he loves a saint. And he's talking about Christmas. Who's the king of Christmas? I guess that's Santa, but that's Jesus, isn't it? It's the most holy Christian holiday. It's the birth of Jesus. So what does it mean if you reverse this, if you reverse the meaning? Well, now you're not saying I love Christianity, you're saying I love the opposite of that, which would be Satan. So in a weird way, it's almost as if Chris Cornell is saying, I love you, Satan, because we're hearing it in reverse. We're not hearing it forward. Forward, it says, Santa, I love you, baby. But reversed, it's not my Christmas king. It's the reverse of the meaning of that, you see? So like I said, the band invites you, taunts you to decode their little, ironic, eccentric tidbits here. But then you take them up on it, and it's kind of like, are you guys really joking, or what's going on here? And, we take note of the fact that the song is called 665, and then song number 5 is called 667. So they're going the extra mile to mess with your head here, because between 667 and 665 is 666. Now, Chris Cornell's mother allegedly is a numerologist, as well as a psychic. So knowing that, even more makes me want to look into this and go, well, is there something to this? Is this just a joke? And sandwiched in between these two songs is the song Beyond the Wheel, which is, a song that Soundgarden did, I think, as recent as their very last show. So this is one of the more well-known songs and one of the better Soundgarden songs overall. I mean, you can't really find a better example showing Chris Cornell's just incredible vocals. It really comes out on this song. So you get the feeling that this is a very important song. So if we look at the lyrics, what do we find? Are we going to find Satan in these lyrics? I don't know. People have said that, I've looked online, and a lot of people think the song is about war. Far beyond the road, between your house and home, there is a churning storm of hailing, burning bones. So that sounds like death to me. And referring to the home, it's not good. Something bad on the horizon there, beyond the road. Tiny baby cries, little tiny pawn. In the profit gain, tiny baby grows. A pawn is a chess piece from the game of chess, which is a game of war, isn't it? And it's also a person used by others for their own purposes. So I guess this is supposed to represent, the child that's indoctrinated into a world where they're going to be drafted into a war for the profit of somebody. So seems straightforward enough. Mother, who's your man? Is he doing what he can to make a proper home by overturning other stones? So to me, this sounds like it's getting a little more personal. It sounds like, to me, that Cornell is bringing this home. Who's your man? Now, Chris Cornell said he never knew his dad. And he said this on an interview with Howard Stern. I forget the year. But it's one of the only places I ever heard him speak about his father in detail. And what he says is that his father worked for the pharmaceutical industry. So apparently Edward F. Boyle would come home from his job at the pharmacy and just start drinking whiskey, and he wouldn't say a word. And according to Chris Cornell, this would go on for hours. And if he did speak, it meant your ass. So that tells me that he was maybe abusive. I mean, how do you not know a guy that you're living in a house with? That's your father. I mean, it's hard to comprehend, but that's what he said. So he didn't really know his father. And if we look at these lyrics, he's asking the question, mother, who's your man? Sounds like a guy who doesn't know who his father is, right? So I think this is a little bit autobiographical. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm coming from with that assumption. By overturning other stones. If you say you left no stone unturned, what does that mean? It means you looked at everything. There was nothing that was hidden. So I don't know if this means, overturning other stones, covering things up, covering secrets up. That's just I'm just venturing a guess there. Father, now he's talking to Father. Father, mighty man, loves his little boys, shows them how to kill to save his precious stones. So Cornell had a brother, and I believe he had some sisters. And the showing them how to kill, I guess that means going to war, recruiting them to war to save his precious stones. A precious stone is a piece of gold, right? Or perhaps a diamond. So I guess we're talking about profit again here. Far beyond the wheel, it steers your life around. We're driving flesh and blood deep into the ground. Now, if you think about driving a car and you're the one behind the wheel, well, you're the one in charge, right? You're the one driving. But if something's beyond the wheel, it means it's in front of you. So this thing that's in front of your wheel, it's steering your life around. So something is in front of you. You're not in charge. Something's in front of your vehicle, your vessel. And then it says, we're driving flesh and blood. I'm not sure if these lyrics are accurate, but it's something like that. We're driving flesh and blood. So if we're driving flesh and blood, we're not driving a car. We're driving a body. This is our body, our person, deep into the ground. So something is controlling us. And if we apply the idea of Satan and mind control, well, it fits in pretty good, actually. I mean, who's the father of war? Satan. And what is mind control all about? It's about controlling your body by controlling your mind. And, in the music industry, we know that a lot of musicians get used and abused and then tossed out, let out to dry, and maybe even disposed of, when someone gets out of line, or someone wants someone else's estate, or someone wants someone else's musical rights. So I'm just throwing some of this stuff out there for you to consider. Now, there's a great quote somewhere that I'm not going to dig it up right now, but it's Kim Thale in some very old article from like 1990 or something, and he addresses the humor of the band. So he sort of acknowledges that the band is being very genuine and sincere and opening themselves up. And then he puts forth the idea that the humor is part of balancing them out so that they're not standing on stage worshiping themselves or idolizing themselves or something. I don't know. Kim Thale really had this all worked out in his head at the time. And I'm sure a lot of it had to do with the climate of music. I think a lot of what Soundgarden was doing was rebelling against what they perceived to be things that needed to die in the tradition of rock and roll music. So it's, I guess you kind of had to be there to really get it in some cases. But even on the Louder Than Love tour, Kim Thale was still making fun of. He said he makes a joke in one of the interviews, something about, yeah, if you turn Louder Than Love backwards, you get all these secret messages. So he was still they were still cracking jokes about this well into the next album tour. So if we move on here, I'm not going to analyze all these songs, but Nazi Driver. Now, according to Kim Thale, this song is about, and you don't know if he's joking or not, but he says it's about turning Nazis into soup and eating them. And if you look at the lyrics, you might actually kind of translate it that way. But we were talking about MK Ultra and how mind control and how that all kind of came out of the Nazi thing. Well, they're referencing Nazis here. Now, Chris Cornell's mother is Jewish, we're told. So it kind of makes sense that this might be something that Cornell might write about in his own abstract, creative way. Turn the head 360 degrees, bite the hand that feeds. I don't care if it tastes like poison. Rip the legs from the thighs. So it's kind of violent. And we're talking about a prison here. Feed the prison, save the eyes. I don't care if it tastes like poison. So I mean, what is a prison if we're talking about Nazis? We're talking about concentration camps, right? So someone's in prison and there's violence and there's blood and it's kind of gory, and what's really going on here? Someone's under control again, so there's the theme of control comes up again. Now, a head injury, what is a head injury? That's if you fall and hit your head, that's a head injury, right? A concussion is a head injury. But what's another type of head injury? Something mental. If you're in a abusive relationship and someone's constantly talking down to you, talking down to you, talking down to you, you might grow up with some damage to your self-esteem, right? So that's kind of a head injury. It's a damage to your ego. So, and it gets a little psychological here. Look at this. You got a kiss for me, it hits me hard. You got a fist for me, you love so hard. So right there, Cornell's referencing, kind of love mixed with abuse. So, I mean, he's pretty young here. I think he's maybe like 23, 24. He's not that young, but he hasn't, they haven't broken big yet. He hasn't left his city, his area that much. I think they maybe went on a little tour here and there, but so this is a guy who has an understanding of emotional abuse, mental abuse. And according to himself, he'd already done lots of drugs before all this, before he even turned 18. He says he gave up on stuff. I didn't start talking about quitting anything until well after I was 18. So he was, he obviously had been subjected to a lot of that type of stuff at a very early age, and you get it in the music. Incessant mace. A mace is a weapon, so a weapon used a lot. First line here, so he's afraid he'll suffer his father's fate, talking about his father again. 2 sets of silverware, cups and plates, 2 burning hands, and bleeding hearts. A bleeding heart is a plant, actually. I forget exactly what type of plant, but if you look this up, you'll find that that's the case. Looks like, kind of like tears. Don't feel it's not too late. Only the photographs on your wall are chained and down your hall, reminding you of all the days when you collected hell to pay. Now this line here, when you collected hell to pay, that reminds me of the interview where Cornell said, if his father opened his mouth, that meant your ass. Again, he is mentioning father in the beginning. So, what happened? What happened in Cornell's youth? That what is all this trauma that he seems to be talking about? What's the real story there? Did something early on here have something to do with his ultimate demise? That's the big question here that I'm trying to probe, and I'm not claiming to have the answers to any of it. I'm just probing this area, and I'm encouraging other people to do the same. People may be more qualified than me. So when we talk about quote-unquote satanic heavy metal hard rock cliches, Black Sabbath probably deserves the award for putting the most loaded information out there. It kind of started by releasing their first album on a Friday the 13th in 1970, I believe it was. And then you open up the album and there's a big upside down cross. So they're kind of like they get the award for really setting the standard there. But here's Soundgarden goes again. Are they drawing the joke out here? Released on October 31st, 1988. It's Halloween of all days. They've got 365 days to choose from, and they choose Halloween. So is this more of their joke that never stops giving, where we're making fun of the quote-unquote satanic cliches and heavy metal? And again, I don't really even see this album as a heavy metal album. But, at what point does humor become, are you trying to promote a heavy metal satanic image, but are you just trying to do it in this backwards sort of way that we can't detect, or that, we allow you to get away with because you're presenting it with humor in an entertaining fashion? Is it just a sideways method of getting the whole cult satanic thing through to the mainstream? Was this SST's idea? Was this Greg Ginn's idea? Or was it just an accident? Did it just happen out of 365 days, it just happened to fall on that one day? I kind of doubt it. So recorded at Dogfish Mobile Unit. Now, what is this dog thing all about? If you're a fan of 90s grunge, you know about this. There's this thing about dogs that keeps coming up. Even Alice in Chains bought into it, with their three-legged dog album. And, Mother Love Bone. Give the dog a bone, right? And, Faster Pussycat has a song about Mother Love Bone singer Andrew Wood called Mr. Love Dog. Was this one of Andrew Wood's nicknames? Love Dog? And then you've got the song Star Dog Champion. And then I think they had something called Star Dog Studios or something. So it just keeps going. And with Soundgarden, you've got the whole, Rusty Cage, Ride a Pack of Dogs, and the album Temple of the Dog, which Chris Cornell wrote almost all of it. And he's got a song called Call Me a Dog on there. And all this kind of culminates in these really silly caricatures, such as Stone Temple Pilots. When they first came out, people called them Stone Temple Pearl Jam because it was just so obvious they were trying consciously to embody these cliches in the 90s grunge scene and capitalize on it. And even to the point where Scott Weiland ended up just like some of these other singers. He ended up dead, right? And, the dogs will find her and all that stuff. The dogs, it just gets really silly, right? But, Stone Temple Pilots, what is that? A stone temple kind of almost makes you think of the stonemasons or Freemasonry. Is there some occult undertone here? People, you'll see endless videos online and websites talking about the Sirius Dog Star and the Star Dog, and these cults that are involved in this stuff. Is this evidence that there are some kind of weird cults behind all this? I don't know. Maybe it's something we need to think about a little bit more. So the last thing I want to touch on a little bit is this Knights of the Sound Table thing. I guess this was the name of their fan club. And you see there's a triangle here, kind of a psychedelic image. And I never thought much of this at all when I was younger. I just thought, oh, that's cool, You get high and the visuals you're good, if you're a stoner. And the Knights of the Sound Table sounds really cool. You never would think that it's some kind of cult, like, is there some secret cult here? Yet they are kind of hinting at it in a weird way. We're not supposed to take it seriously. We're supposed to go, oh, it just sounds cool. But you think about all these famous people that are coming out more and more, flashing the little triangle symbol, covering one eye, and some of the imagery that even Cornell in his solo albums, you look at some of his later albums and even the last Soundgarden, and you look at the symbolism and start scratching your head. It looks really cool. It's, very artistic and all that, but you see these little, these triangles and things. And the Knights Templar, they were the original Freemasons. So, and what do we usually think of when we think of knights? We think of King Arthur, right? Knights of the Sound Table, Knights of the Round Table. Think of maybe England or France. And here's another image. It's a shirt. And we've got what looks kind of like the classic British lion. It's even got a crown, but it looks kind of like Godzilla too. It looks kind of like a demon. And Knights of the Sound Table is written in Old English here. So, obviously referencing the whole King Arthur thing. And we looked at another, in one of my video blogs, we talk about symbolism we talk about serpent symbolism. And the original Apple logo has Isaac Newton sitting under a tree, and there's this paper that's wrapped around the whole thing that looks kind of serpent-like, that, kind of seems like it's modeled after the serpent in the Garden of Eden. So, I don't know, and then you think of nude dragons. What's a dragon? It's a form of a serpent. And it just happens to be an anagram that Soundgarden used when they came back from their hiatus. So again, I'm just throwing these things out for people to chew on and consider more, because I don't want to feed the narrative that, oh, well, Cornell had a very disturbing past and he did drugs when he was younger and obviously he was suicidal and obviously he killed himself. Well, it's not obvious if you through the Freedom of Information Act, go and obtain the official, death investigative report, and then look at my blog at bathshitcave.blogspot.com or watch the video I made and compare it to what you see in that official report, and you will see that clearly the physical evidence does not support suicide. It actually supports murder. So I'm not here to enforce a false narrative. I'm here to ask the question, were the forces that put Soundgarden where they were from the beginning the same forces that took them out?